In last video, we defined a user model, a class with three fields: ID, first name and last name, and we created or generated in fact a constructor and getters and setters and toString. Now, so far so good. It is a plain old Java object type of class, a POSO class. Okay. Now we want to make sure that this particular class maps to an entity, that is, it becomes a JPA entity. Okay, so that it is candidate for being persisted into relational database. How do we do that? We mark this class or annotate this class with an annotation called @entity. Now make sure that you select javax.persistence for @entity and not this one org.hibernate.annotations. Okay, since we are using Spring Data JPA, we are going to use javax.persistence. Now this has marked our class as entity class. Secondly, there is something called ID here. Now this ID is for uniquely identifying a user in our database, that is, ID is acting as a primary key. So how do we tell JPA that use long ID as the primary key for our database or for the table? So we use an annotation called @ID. Again, you should select javax.persistence annotation and not the org.springframework.data annotation. Okay, so this is how we mark it as ID. Secondly, I also want that this ID is being generated by the Spring Data JPA and I do not want it to create it myself. So how can I do that? Okay, so let me use another annotation called generated value, which means this ID's value is going to be generated. Okay, so and how it is to be generated? It is to be auto generated. So I'm going to use a field called strategy equal to generation type dot auto. Okay, so this marks our class as entity where primary key is ID and it is a generated value, where strategy is automatic generation. So this makes our class into an entity.